What's up, you guys? Skiing with Muddy Throttle Off-Road. Tonight we're gonna do a how-to video on how to do the brakes on mag dumps. Can Am, we're gonna do all the brakes and take all the rotors off. So stay tuned. Up here in Muddy Throttle Off-Road shop, what are we doing tonight?
A BJ. Yeah, we're doing pads and rotors on that unit there. Putting some race driven stuff on there, so let you know how it goes.
Hey, so what's up, guys? So today we're going to show you how to do the brakes on the Can Am. First things first, you want to make sure that it's chalked up. When you go to put it on a lift, take the wheels and tires off. But once you get there, you want to go ahead and take off the cap on your brake fluid reservoir. This one's for your front brakes. When you do that, make sure you put a clean towel or paper towel over it. Take the 2 seconds to do that, because what that's going to do is prevent debris from getting inside here. And if that happens, you're going to have problems with braking. You're going to have to end up doing a brake fluid flush, and that's going to cost time and money, and you just don't want that to happen. So take the 2 seconds and go ahead and cover that up to keep that from happening.
Alright, you guys, step one, we got reverse jacks and taking the wheels off.
Actually, correction, step one is doing a wheelie into the shop.
That is definitely
Muddy
step
Throttle
one.
Off-Road, baby.
And then true step one is to jack her up. Put a chalk on the back wheel.
I'm gonna jack you up.
You wish.
I'm a jack. Quack. Oh, yeah. Alright, today we're doing a tutorial on how to take off lug nuts. You put the doohickey on the doodad and you give her a crank. She should come off. If she doesn't, you did her wrong.
We got these 2-inch wheel spacers in here. Those gotta come off as well. And then we'll get working on the rotor. So we got the spacer off. Next step is we're gonna move the caliper out of the way so we can get access to our brake rotor.
Those are 15mm bolts, by the way, in case anybody wanted to know.
Got our caliper out of the way. Notice how we're not letting it hang by the brake line, but these Can Ams have this little plastic shield, so we're just hanging it right there while we work on the rest. Next step is to take our axle nut off. And you can see you got reverse Jackson. He's gonna go ahead and pull that cotter pin out, and then take that axle nut off. So we're gonna let the whole wheeler down, so that way the other side of the axle touches the ground and it doesn't spin on us while we're working on it.
Alright, that's fine.
We're gonna just snug.
Impact makes it much easier.
If for some reason you don't have an impact that has the torque capacity to be able to take that nut off, a couple things you can do. You can put it in 4-wheel drive to lock that diff so it doesn't free spin on you. Another thing you can do is, if you find a long metal bar, something that can handle it, you can put it here between your lugs and put it towards the ground and the direction that you're turning, so it locks itself in place and keeps that axle from spinning. So on the back of your rotor here, you have 4 Torx bolts, and they have Loctite inside them. When taking these apart, you need to be really careful, because a lot of people tend to break the bolts inside. It's a good idea to take some heat to kind of loosen up that Loctite in there. And I always recommend using manual tools such as a socket wrench with your Torx bit to break them first before you take an impact to it. But old Papa over here is gonna have a special tool for us to use. When stopping these brake pads, you have 2. Your back one fits in here like a puzzle piece, and that's how it stays in place. Your other one has this scoop that sits on this fixed pin right here. And how you take these out, you have a slide pin. You're gonna pull this, there we go. You're gonna pull this cotter pin out, and then you're gonna wanna slide this pin. Thank you. this is your pin right here. And as you see, this front brake pad fell. That's the one that's connected around the fixed pin. You just pull that off. The back one that fits like a puzzle piece, you just pull that right out. What you want to do after, take a wire brush, brake cleaner, rag, and you want to clean up your whole assembly.
We got the right nozzle for it, so we're gonna have to just make this guy work. Or we just give her a squirts.
Go for it.
Don't do that. Oh, you just hope for the best.
It should be noted, we're not actually professionals. We're just like y'all.
You're not, I am.
Remember folks, if your workbench ain't cluttered, you ain't doing it right. Alright, so we're working on these screws right here. These are the ones that have Loctite on them. Pawpaw's gonna clean them up a little bit and we're gonna start working on them.
Alright y'all, so what we got here is the rotor. These are T40 Torx. What you're gonna wanna do is get them cleaned out, get all the mud out of here. You wanna try to get as much of that Torx bit in there as possible. And like Reverse said, we're fixing to heat these up where the bolt goes in. So you wanna heat these up, break up that Loctite. And then what we're gonna use is this tool right here. It's a manual impact driver. What this is gonna allow us to do is to put it on the Torx. It's got a spring in there for those of y'all that haven't used one of these. It's pretty much just a hand impact. You take the Torx in this case, you put it on there, there's a spring inside. You push the spring down and then you hit this in with a hammer and it helps break that bolt loose. So what we're gonna do is apply a little heat to these. We're gonna put a little heat up here around this Torx head and a little heat down here where it's threaded into. Try not to get it too hot, but you want to get it warm enough to where it'll turn that thread locker to pretty much liquid and help it break loose. Now, I'm just going to let you know this does have penetrating oil on it, so there's a chance of making a fall.
Now, check the stance. Notice the stance here. Yeah, lean into. Pow, pow. Yeah.
Surprise. And it'll come out just like that. Might take a few hits, but to be expected with there being thread locker all in there. You can see all that yellow stuff coming out. That's all factory thread locker on these bolts.
Pow!
Get her done.
So it's worth noting that when you actually do use one of these, you don't just put it on there and hammer it. You do have to press it down for that spring to activate. You don't just hold it on the screw on the bolt like that. You actually do have to.
Damn, you gotta put your whole 70 pounds of body weight on that mother.
Alright folks, these are the new brakes we're putting on. These are all race driven parts. It's their MudRat series. We decided to go with a solid rotor because if you look at the factory Can Am rotor, they have all these vent holes in it. And what happens is if you ride mud a lot, you tend to get mud trapped in there like that. And when you apply the brakes, the pad grinds against all the mud, rocks, whatever gets caught in here. And that's what wears your pads out so fast. Alright, so the pads we went with are the race-driven, severe duty brake pads. They came highly recommended across a lot of the forums. I talked to Race Driven and they said the best stopping power for these Can Ams are with these rotors. Really not too expensive for the whole setup. So this is what we're going to be putting on. For those of you who don't know, Can Am only has 2 fronts and 1 rear. So if you order Can Am brakes and only 3 of whatever you order come, that's why. Alright, so what I did was cleaned up these 4 bolts, took just a brass wire brush, got all the junk off the threads, all the old Loctite, wiped them down with a rag, and then reinstalled them with blue Loctite. Alright, so we got all these bolts ran in, these Torx. These are T40s, by the way. We got them ran in so they're snug. Can Am says the torque spec on these are 25 foot-pounds. So we're going to go ahead and torque these in a cross pattern. And then this will be done. It can go over to reverse and get put on along with the brake caliper. Alright, so those are all torqued to 25 foot-pounds. So this is what the hub looks like with the new solid MudRat rotor. And then this will go on and get paired with the severe duty pads.
Still got some pads left. You want to see how these suckers work? You got one side, two side. They clamp, you go.
Ooh, yeah. Holy shit! Something's burning, Jake!
Alright, so we got the rotor back on. We got the axle nut hand tight. What we're gonna do now is hit it with the impact, make sure it's nice and tight on there, and then we're gonna put the torque wrench on it and make sure it's at the spec. Can Am calls for 150 foot-pounds of torque on the axle nut. So that's where we're gonna put it at, and then we're gonna swap the pads on the caliper. Alright, now that we got our cotter pin in, we're going to focus on our caliper. What you want to do is you want to take that old back pad, put it back into place. Along the pistons of the caliper. And you're going to take your clamp and you're going to squeeze those pistons back. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you room to put your new brake pads in and still have enough spacing to fit it over the new rotor. So these are new pads. Nice, fresh. You want to take that pin that you took out of the old pads and make sure that's cleaned up. No debris on it so it doesn't get stuck as you're trying to put it back in. Make sure both brakes go through. And what we're gonna do is take that punch again. And we're gonna use that punch to hit that pin back in the hole. And so what you want is to be able to see that hole for the cotter pin. So you take that cotter pin, put it back in the hole, spread your brake pads, you slide them on the rotor. Make sure your holes line up nice and even, and you want to take the old bolts that you took out from the caliper and you want to clean them off. Clean all that old thread locker off. Alright, so we cleaned off the old bolts as best as possible. Now we're going to add just a bit of thread locker on there. And we're going to hand thread these in first. And hand thread it in. Next, we're gonna take that 15mm we had before, snug them up. So I got a torque wrench and a 15mm, set 40 foot-pounds of torque. Always double check. So we're gonna go back over here to where we took the cap off for brake fluid reservoir. And we're gonna go ahead and put that back on. Alright, now that we got the reservoir closed up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna test the brakes. We're gonna do that by pulling the brake handle and making sure that these pads and the pistons close and open on the brake rotors. Right now we have full movement. So when I pump the brakes, I should have nothing. Let it go. It should be able to move. Hold it, and it should be not going nowhere.
Alright y'all, so this is what the finished product looks like. We got those brand new brake rotors, the brand new solid brake rotors on there with those brand new pads. It's all put back together. We put new thread locker on those caliper bolts. She's all good to go. Alright, so we got the front back together. We're all good to go. Brakes work great. Now we're gonna go on to the back brake. There's only one. And RJ's gonna go ahead and walk us through it.
So on the back brake, it's the same as the front for disassembly and reassembly. The only difference is they do not share the same brake fluid reservoir as the fronts. It has its own, which for those of you who didn't know that, it's actually under your seat. It's this little circular container right here, dead straight in the middle underneath your seat. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open that up just as we did the front one so that we can relieve pressure when we move those pistons. So we're gonna do the same thing as we did before. Take out those 15mm bolts, pull the caliper off, take the axle nut off, pull that rotor, pull those Torx bolts out like we showed you before, change the rotor, swap it back on, tighten everything back up to Torx spec, caliper back on, bolt that back up, and then test the brake, make sure it works. We'll let you know when it's done. So same as the front, once you take that cap off, make sure you put a clean rag or something over it just to keep dust out.
Alright guys, we're out here, we're buttoning up the last little bit on the brakes on this Can Am. Got the rear brakes on. Getting the wheel spacers and the wheels back on. We'll be ready to ride, and we're gonna do a little test ride here tonight. Alright. She's all ready to ride. Got the brakes all wrapped up. I don't know. They're working. I think the brakes work. I'd say what? 6, 7 beer job?
Call it a 6-pack.
Call it a 6-pack. See y'all later.
Won't you carry me home? Oh.
Yeah. Holy shit! Holy shit!
Can we be serious for 5 seconds, buddy? Quack. Okay?
Yeah, buddy.
Never mind.
Buddy, listen to me, buddy. This is the best mobility you can get, buddy. 1000cc, buddy. You go brap all over the place. All the ladies, they swoon. They drip out of their pussy lip. All over. Buddy, listen to me. It don't get much better than this. Dual wheel. Nothing sponsored yet. Don't get any better, buddy. You buy or you go.